Mr. Leslie Tetteh,
Yeah.
thanks for joining us. You are with the Ghana National Education Coalition campaign. Taking a look at the various party manifestos, what are some of the key observations you've made so far?
I think that basically all the parties are looking at improving access, and they have some emphasis on improving quality as well. And so many of them are taking inspiration from the constitutional provision of F3, free, compulsory, universal basic education, and are hoping to expand access to both basic and secondary education because as we sit in Ghana now, we have just about 80% of children of the correct ages enrolled in basic education. That means that some 20% are out of school at the moment for various reasons. And so definitely we need to expand access to education at the basic level. At the secondary level, we also have a high number of people failing to transit from basic to secondary for various reasons, which we could go into later. And that shows that there's a clear need for something to be done to improve the number of people who are able to transit from basic and access secondary education. Teacher challenges are huge. There has been a lot of talk about that. And so it's important to see the issues of quality also featuring very prominently in the manifestos of most of the parties.
As a key stakeholder in our educational setup, what would you say is the most pressing challenge that these manifestos address? Is it one of access or of quality? At least it appears that the debate on education has boiled down to these two.
Let me give a brief rundown of what the situation is, and then I'll zero in on what I think should be the issue. In the first place, as I mentioned, Ghana as a country has pursued the free, compulsory, universal basic education policy. Now, inherent in that policy is the issue of ensuring quality, because if you send a child through school and he finishes whichever level and is not able to give you the appropriate outcomes that you expect, either reading and writing or being useful to the economy, then the system has failed. But the current situation we have as a country, we have gone through reforms that has come out with recommendations on how to improve quality and access for all basic education. Now, if you look at the policies that we've pursued, in my opinion, most of the policies have tended to drive access rather than look at quality. Under the F3, a program was put in place, and it is out of that program that policies like the capitation grant that was an attempt to make basic education free. The school feeding program, from 2009, the free school uniform and free exercise books policies or interventions came into being. Now, all these policies are fundamentally policies that encourage people to participate in education at the basic level. What it has led to is that the numbers in our classrooms have swollen. We've had more pupils enrolling. And I'm not saying that we have reached universal enrollment yet, but more people have enrolled. And whilst we were pursuing these policies, we did not take any measures to ensure that the inputs that go into teaching and learning are provided for. And so that, for me, has reflected in the consistency in the poor pass rate of BECE. For the past 10 years or so, BECE results have hovered between 50 and 60% of the students passing in the subject that enables them to be placed in secondary education. The figure that I saw in the documents of the GES was that about 47% of them have failed to get placement in senior high school. So clearly there's a problem there. And I think that at this point in time, whilst access is important because we have about 800,000 children who are out of school at the moment, and there are various interventions that can be put in place to mop them up. But whilst we are looking at our crowded classrooms, we see that we have not improved on providing quality teaching and learning materials. We have had about 38 training colleges in the past 10 years. It hasn't changed. The recent EMIS, that is the Education Management Information Systems data, show that there's one private training college somewhere in the Brown Avo. So we have 39, but 38 of them are public, and it hasn't changed. We have a teacher deficit of, the figures keep changing, but it ranges between 30,000 and 60,000. So these are real issues. Teachers are refusing to go to deprived areas where they are mostly needed, especially trained teachers. And so you have an over-concentration of trained teachers in urban areas. For the past 2 or 3 years, we have not come out with procurement for any new textbooks in the country. And so these are challenges, and children are still learning under trees and things like that. So I feel that in our bid to fulfill international obligations like the Education for All goals and like the MDG 2, universal primary completion, universal basic completion, we have tended to invest a lot in promoting access, seeing the numbers attending school increase. But whether actual teaching and learning is taking place within our schools, we have not done that. Teacher supervision is poor. As I speak now, the rate is 27%. That means that if you take teachers on the average, 27% of the time, they are not, or 27% of them are not punctual in school, they miss school and things like that. So people will go through whether 9 years or 11 years of basic education or whatever level, and they will come out without being able to perform the minimum things that they have to do. So that's a problem.
Isn't that a bit of a paradox that you have somewhere in the region of about 800,000 school children who are supposed to be in school not having access, and yet we propose that the focus should be on quality? I mean, some would argue that to have some education may be better than having no education at all.
I'm not disputing the importance of access, but I'm saying that our access-driven policies have failed to be equally matched with ensuring quality. So we have pumped our classrooms with kids, and yet they are not learning. So somehow you don't get the balance. But it's also important to note that the number of children who have access to school far outweighs children who are out of school. But it is important that every child goes to school because education is a basic and a fundamental right. The other point is that if you look at it very critically, it's not all these 800 plus children who are not in school, because of some of the reasons that have been assigned. There are a number of children who are children of nomads. I mean, their parents are moving with cattle from place to place. We cannot put them in the normal schooling system. There are people who are children of settler farmers in cocoa growing areas. The normal school system will not. And so the importance of complementary education for groups like this I think are the way forward to mop up the other children who we have not been able to get into school. And a large proportion of the children out of school are also in the category of people who have dropped out of school for various reasons. Either their schools are not very friendly. You take girls, for instance, sometimes the school environment is not conducive for them. There are no separate toilets and changing rooms and things like that. It doesn't encourage them to stay in school. So it's not just about building school blocks, but there should be measured policies to be able to mop up and ensure that these 800,000 children, appropriate measures that meet their specific needs are put in place to bring them into the education for all.
Now let's look at some of the proposals that have been made as against those that were set in previous times, especially by those parties who have had the opportunity to form governments. What have you observed? Are we having a forward move from what was said sometime back either in 2008 or before that? Or are we seeing a recycling of the same promises that were made in times past? And how well are we doing even in progress with regards to the promises that were made?
I don't have a problem with recycling of measures. If we have not been able to move up to where we have to be, and we think that particular things have not been done, then there's a lot of reason to see it appear again. But beyond that, you notice that we as a country have laid down maybe policies that are supposed to guide us in various sectors. In the education sector, we had the education reform that was based on the Professor Namwa Mensah Review Committee that came up with certain recommendations, white paper under the previous MPP administration. And quite a number of them, there was implementation on some aspects. But like I said earlier on, the policies that were pursued were mainly access-driven policies. Now, I'm not saying that we didn't come out with measures, but if I talk about implementation, I'm talking about policies that we put down, put measures to, and made provision in our budgets for. If you take our budgets, apart from the general education sector budget, we have special intervention programs that come under various headings. School feeding is under that, capitation grant is covered there, free exercise books, even schools under trees are covered there. Now for these programs, government allocates funding specifically for that from various sources. But you don't see in all this, talking about those who have tasted power before, in both terms, we did not see investments that are going to support teachers within their programs. It was either donor-funded programs or the normal GOG, which sometimes may not come after all. So there are a lot of good programs on our documents, but they don't see implementation.
The NDC manifesto, for example, proposes that they would have more teachers. They would increase the subventions for teachers to go for further training and to take up other courses. The MPP, for example, is proposing also that they would even have teachers access affordable housing, among other issues, and also bring their remunerations also to a certain level that would allow them to feel comfortable in their jobs. Don't you think these are important contributions to some of the challenges that you've talked about, that teachers need to be given specific attention and also allocations that are made for them?
If you review the proposals that are coming from all the parties, the element of free education is so strong in the sense that we are talking about either removing costs that are being borne by parents now or making it outrightly free and making it compulsory. One party is talking about ensuring that there's a system of policing parents. Now, all these proposals have their cost implications. Now, if we are to cost the manifestos of each party, you will notice that the proposals that we have within the manifestos are introducing new dimensions in our budgeting. Now, if you look at it carefully, if we want to promote free SHS now, or we are redefining basic education from KG to senior high school, or you even look at the proposal that we are going to have cluster schools that have every facility from KG to the university, or you look at proposals that are talking about making basic education truly free, in which sense they are removing all costs and then making sure that 60% of remaining schools under trees are replaced, coupled with housing for teachers, increased remuneration for teachers, and all this. If you cost these things, how much of our current budget is going to education as we speak? Between 25% and 29% of our budget is going into education. In the past, we have not crossed 30% of our budget going to education. Now, these proposals that we are putting, what is going to happen to other sectors? Where are we going to get the funding from to make up for these things? There has been some proposals, but most of them have partly addressed the issues, either the first year of SHS or maybe the cost of a certain number of classrooms. But if you take the proposals that they are putting in place comprehensively, where are we raising the funds from in 4 years to make sure that we put up housing for teachers, to make sure that we are training teachers, to make sure that we provide universities in every region, 200 senior high schools, free boarding, tuition, everything. Now, these have huge budget implications, and I think that there must be some answers from the parties to settle us that these things are practically feasible.
Take the NDC manifesto, for example. It insists that the SHS program should span over a period of 3 years, and they think that within a space of 3 years, adequate education can be given a child to move on from that point, even into the tertiary institution. Then you have the MPP manifesto also proposing that it will revert to the 4 years SHS system should they come into government. What is the situation on the ground, and which of these periods do you think will be most suitable to offer a child good quality education that prepares him, one, for professional life, and then also to be able to go into tertiary institutions?
There are different models in education. It depends on the model you want to run, but each model goes with the appropriate resources and systems that run the model. The 3 years was based on recommendations that all the issues of quality, for instance, adequate provision of school infrastructure, teaching and learning materials, making sure that we have the adequate number of teachers in place, assessments, programs are in place. Now, these things should be there to ensure that we achieve that. The 4 years basically is arguing that because these things are absent, they need a little more time to... The challenge is that we ran the 4-year system for a short period. I've forgotten the number of years. There was no assessment of the 4-year system. We did not get to know what the problems were with the 4-year system. It was reverted to a 3-year system. Now, the 3-year system has barely run, and we are talking about another change. I think it is unnecessary. I think that as a country, we must run our systems and focus on the critical issues. The critical issues are not the duration. The critical issue is to make sure that children who are accessing senior high schools have all the resources that they need to access the schools. If those things are there, whether it is 4 years or it is 3 years, they will come out prepared to face life. But if we keep juggling the system, then we are making it very unstable. We are disturbing our own programs, because when this system was changed to 3 years, by the time we were about entering the 4th year, we were not even prepared as a country in terms of infrastructure to accommodate the 4th year students. And so I think that we must let systems run and focus on the critical issues, that children go to school, they have teachers, they are learning well, they come out and they are relevant in contributing to national development.
What do you foresee to be the immediate challenges that the next government will be faced with? And what do you think should be the areas of critical concern or focus for them?
Before I get to that, there is one issue I want to mention in terms of the manifestos. A careful look at the manifestos of 5 of the parties. You notice that as a country, apart from the constitutional provisions on education, we also have an Education Act, Act 778, which also outlines things that should be done. Now, none of the parties have truly provided for some of these provisions that the Act requires that government should put in place. For instance, the Act requires that education, that is basic and secondary education, should be decentralized. I did not see that in any of the manifestos. Does it mean that the parties are going to implement programs that are not in line with our manifestos? We are also talking about putting in place certain independent bodies to guarantee the quality of education. One of them is the National Teachers Council, that will be responsible for the professional development, licensing, and registration of teachers. There is the National Inspectorate Board. So far, that is the only one that processes have started to put them in place. There's also the National Curriculum and Assessment Authority. That has also no effort has been done. We expected to see clear provisions to address these things. The second issue is that most of the parties have failed to address the needs of people or let me put it this way, people with special needs, people with hearing impairment, physical impairment. It hasn't been adequately catered for. There's just the mention of an assessment center, and then a vague pronouncement that there will be measures will be taken to increase resources in that sector. These group of people consist of about 20% of Ghana's current population and must be catered for. Gender, I didn't see much of gender in terms of making sure that girls are able to finish school, they stay in school, they complete school. And the data shows clearly that many of them are dropping out because of challenges that are peculiar to them as girls and to other socio-cultural factors that inhibit their access to schooling. And we think that it's important that some of these things are reflected. Now, to the issue of what is the critical thing for now. As I have said, I think that we are looking at producing people that can contribute to national development. And if our current education system, by and large, is producing a large majority of people who cannot pass BECE to get placement, if you take proficiencies in English and in mathematics as pieces, it is very low. That tells you that there's a fundamental problem. So I believe that whilst we seek at building schools and putting up structures to accommodate the children, it must run vis-a-vis with programs and policies that will ensure that the teacher is in the classroom, he has the appropriate materials to teach, and the children are learning, proper learning is taking place. So whilst many of the parties are addressing the big level political or policy related issues, I think that there are micro level things like teacher supervision, who is supervising the teacher to make sure that he's in the school. What are the measures in place to make sure that even if we are pursuing a free SH policy or we are replacing 60% of schools under trees, who is making sure that there's proper accountability of the resources that we are pumping as a country so that we avoid leakages? I think that these are some of the critical things that we need to put systems in place to address. But having said all, I think that we are on course as a country. Most of the programs are addressing both access and quality, but we need some guarantees as far as implementation is concerned.
Mr. Leslie Tetteh, thank you very much for speaking to us.
It's a pleasure.